Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman, and we're here with another video to help you improve your chess game. Today's video is going to be one of those ones that is a lot more about podcasty kind of material than it would be moving things on the board. So if you're looking for excitement, about 90% of my other videos here on the channel Dan Heisman Chess have good board piece movement, but this one is more like a talky thing. So if you're looking for action, I got a whole bunch of others for that. While I'm talking about my channel, Dan Heisman Chess, I often finish my videos by saying, if you haven't told your friends about my channel, Dan Heisman Chess, could you please do that? But a lot of people don't listen all the way to the end, so I'll start at this time. If you haven't told your friends about Dan Heisman Chess, please do it. That word of mouth is one of the best ways to get people to be aware of things like this that can help their game. I'm going to talk today about novice nook and the idea that I talked about many years ago. And the name of the novice nook is Sunil's Rooks and Right Tackles. Who is Sunil? Sunil is FIDE Master Sunil Veeramantree, who also happens to be Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura's father. And Sunil, of course, is a contemporary of mine, and we have crossed paths many times. He was nice enough to say hi to me at the US Open a couple years ago. What's this thing up with Sunil's Rooks and Right Tackles? Well, I'm going to read you the first page of the Novice Nook because I can't really say it any better than I did there. So let's see what I say. The quote of the month starts out, "Is it possible that football players learn faster than chess players?" I mean, we know that football players are supposed to be less smart than chess players. I mean, that's not always true, clearly. But, you know, the conventional wisdom is chess players are smart and football players are big and strong and not necessarily that smart. We know that's not really true, but just a point. Anyway, conventional wisdom suggests that football players are not as smart as chess players. But as one who comes from a football family, and I say, yes, Coach John Heisman of Heisman Trophy fame is a relative, and our family pronounces the name with an S sound, Heisman, not the often misused sound Z like Heisman. So we're not the Heisman Trophy, we're the Heisman Trophy. Anyway, by the way, my relatives is my great-grandfather's first cousin. Anyway, it occurred to me that football players possibly learn faster than chess players. I first got that feeling when I noticed that almost all lower-rated players had difficulty consistently following the important opening principle, move every piece once in the opening before you move any piece twice unless there is a tactic or safety issue. Before I started teaching chess full-time, I never would have guessed that this simple concept would be so difficult to apply. However, I heard that Hunter Elementary School in New York City, the students make this mistake much less frequently than other people at their level do, thanks to the practice schedule and the acumen of Coach FIDE Master Sunil Veeramantree, who is Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura's father. According to lore, when Hunter practices chess after school, Sunil is on the lookout for players who don't officially develop all of their pieces. When he spots a culprit, he takes action. For example, assume a youngster has had several opportunities to get his rooks into the game but has failed to take advantage. The scene might go something like this. Let's scroll down for a second. Sunil walks up to the board and he scoops both the players' rooks off the board and deposits them in his pocket. What does the student say? "Hey, you just took my rooks." What does Sunil say? "Well, you weren't using them. You had chances, but instead you repeatedly moved the pieces you had already developed." Student, "Well, give them back and I'll use them." Sunil wisely says, "Well, I will, but not until your next game." Sunil's approach is very effective. It is no wonder that his team, Hunter Elementary School, has won many national championships at the grade and elementary school championships. If they enter 40 players, a practice other schools should emulate since prize rules are cleverly designed to make it beneficial to bring more players, you can be pretty sure that even the worst ones will have learned to get all their pieces into the game, giving them an enormous advantage over other schools where the students have not learned to do that. In football, the incentive to learn works similarly to Sunil's approach. If a football coach has a player that does not do as he is told, the player might be given another chance, and if he continues to not do what the coach wants him to do, he'll be pulled from the game. Threatening to take away the ability to play is a strong incentive to force the player to do it right. It's not up to the player's discretion. Even if the player wishes to do it wrong, he just can't get away with it repeatedly. That's not true in chess. Most of my students are adults, and certainly a big number of them are also youngsters. And when these people of all ages play, I am either not present, or even if I am present, I'm not allowed to interfere with them until the game is over. That means I can't bench them if they're not doing what they're being taught. I can't walk up to them in the middle of the game and say, all right, you've had 3 chances to move your queen rook toward the middle or onto that open file, but instead you've been moving your knight back and forth. I'm going to take your rook off the board. I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to interfere. I can't bench them. I can't tell them they can't finish the game. So without a strong negative disincentive, which except might be losing, which is not always immediately present. After all, they're playing their peers who are also making the similar mistakes. These students often don't develop all their pieces. Worse they usually don't realize anything is wrong until I point it out after the game. So what's going on here is a chess coach, I can bring the horse to water, but I can't make them drink. I can tell them about things and they can listen or not, but then it's up to them to actually do it. And I can't do much more incentivizing than just telling them that they would be a much better player. Very often when they violate these principles, they still win the game or even get a draw. And then they think everything's okay because they're playing their peers. But then when they play people much better than them and they don't do some of the things that they're supposed to do, they find that they are, of course, much worse off for not doing it. Now, when I teach the players this principle, move every piece once before any piece twice unless there's a tactic, I've probably taught maybe, I'm guessing 700 to 800 people one-on-one who were low enough rated that they weren't following that consistently. So that became one of the big issues when I would see an opening where they would start moving pieces multiple times that weren't really doing anything. For instance, making what I call silly threats, which are threats that are easily met, that don't actually improve your position or improve your pieces. They simply, make a threat and hope the opponent doesn't see it, which is certainly not the way to play. When they do stuff like that and have what I call a better idea than just following the principles and getting their pieces out, then we talk about it and I give them incentive about what they should do to fix it. Of the 700 or 800 people who have done that, I have found that only one, that's exactly one, it was a 30-year-old adult I was teaching about maybe 15 to 20 years ago. Sorry, my dog was barking. 15 to 20 years ago, this adult that I was teaching, I told him, move every piece once before you move any piece twice unless there was tactics. And he came back to me and showed me his future games. And in every single game, he was trying to do it the very best that he could. And I said to him, you're moving all your pieces once before you move any pieces twice unless there's a tactic. That's really good. This is kind of unusual. And he said, why? It's not that hard. It's a pretty simple concept. When you said it, I said, oh, that makes sense. And I tried to do it every time I played. And I said, well, yeah, but I've taught about 300 people who were low enough that I had to teach them this. And many of them eventually did it, but you're the first one that did it right away based on us just talking about it. And every game you've shown me since then has followed this principle. And nobody else has been able to do that. And he said, well, that's surprising because, it's not really that hard. And I said, well, it must be a lot harder than I thought it was because, as I said, a lot of people eventually do it, but you're the first one to do it starting in the very next game and game after game after game after game and not falling into bad habits or being enticed by the dark side and, trying to do things that you shouldn't do. And so anyway, I had another student a couple years later who was another student who was at a live lesson, and he said he was going to be the second person to do that. And then the next game, he showed me a game where he played bishop to d7 for black, and then he played bishop a4, hitting the pawn on c2. And when white saved the pawn on c2, I said to him, why did you play bishop to a4? And he said, well, it's very clever because if I hit the pawn on c2, there's only so many ways he can save it. If he pushes it, it weakens the d3 square. If he plays b3, it weakens all the dark squares on the queen side, a3, b2, and c3. If he guards it with a piece, it ties up that piece guarding the pawn, and therefore, however he saves the pawn, I get some benefit out of that. And I said, well, yes, okay, but does that benefit more than justify the loss of time that you get from moving the bishop out to a4? And he said, well, of course, I thought so, or else I wouldn't have done it. And then my answer was, oh, well, 1 out of 301. meaning I had told him that out of 300 people, only one had done it, and he was going to be number 2, but the very next game he showed me he didn't do it. And since then, it's been another, 15 years or so, and I'm still looking for number 2. So I'm now up to maybe 700 or 800 people. Now, again, I get a lot of people who are already good enough when I start teaching them that this is not an issue. They develop their pieces efficiently in the opening. But of the 700 or 800 people who started who were low enough that they didn't, I've only had one who actually started doing it game after game, every game. And again, I can't emphasize more strongly that he's not the only one who ever did it. He's the only one who did it starting right away in the very next game and for thereafter. Because everybody else gets enticed. They really want to have this better idea. They want to go out. I had a student today that did it. We've talked about it before, but he wanted to do it. He threatened a knight twice by moving pieces multiple times. He said, I thought I was winning a pawn. I said, how are you winning a pawn? You're threatening to win a pawn. All he has to do is guard the knight and you don't win anything. He said, well, yeah, I didn't figure that out. And I said, yeah, but you have to figure that out, because if you make a threat, you have to know whether your opponent can meet it or not. If they can't, the threat can be executed and it becomes a tactic and you're winning material or checkmating or whatever the threat does. But if they meet it, and it turns out by meeting it, it makes all those moves you just made meaningless, then it's a silly threat and you shouldn't do it. So you can't make threats without having some idea whether or not your opponent might be able to meet it or not. And he said, well, I really didn't know that. I just made the threat figuring I might win a pawn. And of course ended up moving pieces twice. And then later in the game, it turned out his opponent had 5 pieces developed and he only had 2. And then his opponent has started to attack him and he had trouble finishing his development. And it all came from, instead of getting all his pieces out and castling, he was doing kind of silly stuff like that. And that's what I'm hoping that the viewers of this video won't be doing. Now, one of the things that's important to point out in this video is this idea that Sunil has about taking the rooks and, stopping his students from not developing their pieces is just a generic example of this particular principle: move every piece once before you move any piece twice unless there's a tactic. But what I said about chess players and football players applies to everything and not just that one principle. It applies to whatever it is that we're trying to teach. If we're trying to teach don't play the opening like the middle game, it could be that principle. If we're trying to teach in the end game, as soon as it's safe for your king to get activated, bring your king out. If we're trying to teach someone, don't try to attack if there's nothing in the position that says that you can attack. In order to attack, you need an advantage, at least in that part of the board. This is one of Steinitz's rules. There's thousands of principles in chess. There's many, many ideas that you learn as you're trying to get better. And yes, it's very, very difficult for a human. If they make a mistake and just tell them about it, it's very difficult for them to just stop. They need to keep making it and keep getting burned until they finally say to themselves, all right, no, the coach must be right, I shouldn't do that. But the point is, the football players don't have to go through that. They don't need the human nature of, oh, I'm just going to keep doing what I want to do. The coach is going to say, that's not right. We'll give you one more chance, or maybe they won't even give them one more chance, or run laps, or whatever they have to do. And if you don't do it, somebody else is playing. If you're the biggest, strongest, fastest right tackle, and you're the starting right tackle, but you're also the one who says to the coach, sorry, coach, I know you told me to block that linebacker, but I'm going to go over there and try to find some other guy to block because I think that's a better idea in this position. The coach isn't going to keep giving you chances to do that to see how well it works. He's just going to say, this is the way the play is designed. If you don't want to run it, we'll get someone in there that does. I don't care if you're bigger and stronger and faster. If you're not going to run the play, it takes all 11 guys doing what they're supposed to do to make the play work right. I will get someone in there who does it right. In chess, you're one-on-one. Nobody's allowed to interfere with your game while you're playing it. If you play the game and you do all these things wrong and your opponent does all these things wrong too, you have a 50-50 chance to win if their rating's the same as yours. And you don't get that as much incentive. Now, what's ironic is when you play people who are more consistently above you, they punish you more, and that helps. And one of the coaches here in Philadelphia at Masterman, he often had his kids play 2 sections up. So if they were rated 1150, instead of playing in the under 1200 section, or even the under 1400 section, he would have his 1150 players playing in the under 1600 section where they would play more 13, 14, 1500s, because he felt like if they played their peers and they did things wrong, they wouldn't get punished for it, and they would keep doing the things wrong, and he wanted them to lose if they did things wrong. So he wanted them to play up where they're playing people who knew how to punish them when they weren't doing things right, and he felt his people would win more that way. And of course, Masterman won several national championships, just like Hunter did at the start of the video. So, you know, getting people to stop doing things is a really important part of being a good coach. And, you know, sometimes a coach is just a chess coach. We're not a psychologist. And a lot of times when people have trouble doing these things, it's somewhat of a psychological problem. And sometimes I get students who, I know what they're doing wrong, they know what they're doing wrong. I tell them how they can stop doing it, what they need to do. They know what they need. If I ask them, what do you need to do to stop doing this? They can tell me exactly what they need to do. They just can't bring themselves to do it. And of course, in that case, sometimes I say, I should have a subcontractor, a chess psychologist, who handles people that know what they're doing wrong, know what they have to do to fix it, and just can't bring themselves to do it. That's a little bit different from not knowing what to do or not able to do it or anything like that. They're perfectly able to do it. They just, for some psychological reason, they can't bring themselves to do it. So, yes, if you were a football coach, you can get all the players to do what you want to do. You can pull them out of the game. You can pull them out of practice. You can tell them they're not going to start. In chess, anybody can go to the tournament. They can play as many games as they want. Nobody can pull them out of the game. Nobody's going to kick them out of the tournament. No, the coach can't pull them out. Maybe if you have a coach like Hunter Elementary School, theoretically you could go to a tournament and tell a kid if he keeps not doing something, you're not going to let him play the last round or something. But I doubt most coaches would do that. But the nice part about what Sunil was doing is he was doing it after school, not during a tournament, when he's allowed to interfere with the game, because that's where they would play the most. You know, they would only go to a tournament every few weeks, but they would play after school every day, and therefore he got lots of chances to go up and pull the rooks off the board and get them to develop their pieces that way. And again, it applies to every single possible principle, especially the easy ones and the most important ones. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed today's video. You can like the video, you can subscribe to the channel, but as I said at the start of the video, best thing you can do is tell your friends about the channel Dan Heisman Chess. Word of mouth is great, and we'll see you next time for the next one. Bye.